Building a business is one thing, right? I mean, that's what many of us are endeavoring, whether it be through real estate investing or whatever business it is. And y'all know some people out there, but exiting it successfully and turning it into a true legacy for your family, that's a completely different matter. And today's guest helps business owners to unlock hidden value and navigate the emotional and financial side of selling. Good morning, and great morning, guys. Welcome to another fabulous episode of Exit Strategies Radio Show. Look here, there's a song that says the second time around. Look here, and Cameron know what I'm talking about. We're going to have a great time here today. Well, I got to give a quick shout out to those who listen to us faithfully all the way from Hollywood, what you know, no good, all the way at the Monkey's Corner. Y'all know my mama live out there, y'all. Also, Pastor Vanderbilt Evans Sr. and his wonderful bride, Elder Evans. And look here, I get tickled because the two of them to me are like priceless. I love spending time with them. They're amazing people. So if you know them, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, then you need to. Let's get at it. Look here. So we're going to jump straight into today's episode. And, you know, obviously we always got to let you know what we're doing here. Y'all know it. If you've been listening, if you're not, then, hey, I need y'all to get on the bandwagon and let's tell it like it is. Look here, this is what we're doing around here. We're legacy building. Our mission being as simple as it is to empower our community through financial literacy and real estate education. We're legacy building. Again, that is what we're doing. So I got to give you, quote unquote, what that text is for today. And I'm doing something a little new now. So I need y'all to keep up with me. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Look here. So our text today, maximizing business value for a lasting legacy. What goes on beyond. I'm very honored today to have as a guest, Mr. Cameron Bishop. Y'all call it that last name. So y'all know we're in this right here today. So he is the managing director and partner for Raincatcher. Now we're going to get into a little bit of that, but building a business is one thing, right? I mean, that's what many of us are endeavoring, whether it be through real estate investing or whatever business it is. And y'all know some people out there. I know a young lady that I'm watching on Facebook and she's out here killing with her Geechee crab dope. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So y'all can holler at her, let her know this episode she needs to tune in for. But exiting it successfully and turning it into a true legacy for your family, that's a completely different matter. And today's guest, Cameron Bishop, helps business owners to unlock hidden value and navigate the emotional and financial side of selling. Now, he's got a long resume. He's, again, the managing director and partner for Raincatcher, a firm that specializes in helping entrepreneurs maximize business value before sale. He brings decades of experience advising leaders on strategy, growth, and transition planning. And he's known for guiding owners through both the technical and the emotional, because we have emotion about our baby, right? Challenges preparing for a successful exit. And y'all got to pardon that pun, because I meant to put that drum roll in there, because you know we around here about exit strategies, about getting on to that next thing and getting, quote unquote, to our own personal promised land. So I want to take this time right now to introduce an amazing guest who's going to tell us how to strategize for our future as we enter into our next season and leave our legacy for those who are behind. So, Cameron, how you doing today?
Corwin, I'm doing fantastic. I like myself even better now after your setup there.
Well, look,
you're a good front man.
We do what we can. And apparently we had a practice run at it. So look here. I love it. So if you don't mind, our listeners, high level about you, Raincatcher, and what you guys do.
Yeah. Well, first I have to say, Corey, that I'm really grateful that you have me on your show today, because my message today is a true personal passion, because I've spent my whole career primarily buying small companies, and I've seen all the mistakes those business owners make. So I'm trying to help them to prepare when it's time for them to exit. So for myself, I'm a born and raised Kansas City guy. Today, I'm an investment banker with a firm called Raincatcher out of Denver, Colorado. We help business owners when it's time to sell their company. But for 35 plus years, I was on the other side of the table. I was a buyer. So I was supported by private equity firms, and I spent about a little over $500 million and did about 50 plus transactions buying small businesses. And I saw all the mistakes those business owners make where they literally walked away and left money on the table. Some of them, because of the things they either did or didn't do, made their companies unsellable.
Wow. Wow.
Let's take a short break.
Do you remember your grandma's front porch? You know, that spot where stories were told, kisses were stolen, and sweet tea was always being sipped. Now imagine giving your family a place to make those same memories, but in a brand new, energy efficient, and home that was built just for you. At Country Boy Homes, we help folks just like you find that forever feeling. Whether it's your first home, your next home, or we're done with rent forever, like seriously home. We specialize in affordable and durable manufactured and modular homes, the kind that make room for muddy boots, big dreams, and second helpings. Come see what coming home really feels like. Call 843-574-8979 today. Country Boy Homes, built to last, priced for you. So one of the things we talked about it, our listeners know, look, I'm a business owner, right? So I'm the great grandson of a carpenter, side hustler, made wine and barbecued hogs and stuff for people. And I always tell people all that work that he did on houses, all of that work he did making wine, all this stuff that he did over the years that I got to spend with him, which was my upbringing up until his demise. I gleaned it, but didn't document what it is that he left or had left there for me. I didn't understand it. Now, then I have a much better understanding now, and I realize it as a missed opportunity. And then here I have children who have no interest in the business that I'm in, that I'm doing. They're not there yet. If they get there, great. But if they don't, what happens? So that's the conversation that I like to start with. How do you advise people? Because, in your mind, hey, I'm going to take it as far as I can, and I'm going to give it to my children. They're going to go down the road with it and take it as far as they can, and they're going to leave it to their children, so forth and so on. We think that is our legacy. How do you have that conversation with people? And what do you see happening in that arena and space? That was a whole lot.
Sure. Great question. That's the beginning of the process. But first, I have to go off track for a second.
Let's
You
go.
mentioned that your great grandfather liked to barbecue hogs. Well, I'm in Kansas City. We argue in Kansas City, that is the mecca of barbecue. So you already got my attention. But beyond that, you mentioned that your great grandfather was a carpenter, brilliant trade, highly talented. But he is the definition of what is called a lifestyle business. So he doesn't have a business that he could sell. The business was him because of his talent. So I spent 5 years as a consultant in a small firm, and I couldn't sell that business because I was the business. People bought my services. And it's amazing how many people today, Corwin, who can make tons of money or at least a very good lifestyle for themselves, but they don't have anything they can sell because the whole reason they're making money is dependent on them. So that's the first thing that people need to understand. We have a lot of people who contact us at Raincatcher who want to sell a business. They might be a writer, for example, or an independent lawyer or an independent doctor. Any profession that is totally dependent on their personal skills is not sellable in almost all cases. There's exceptions, of course, but in most cases, it's just not. And I've seen businesses where these folks are making 7 figures, but they don't have anything they can pass on to anybody else.
And that's interesting. I talk about it all the time when we, bring agents on into our company. We're trying to define business. There's self-employment and there's business. And most people don't know where the distinguishing line is, where the definition changes. We sometimes start, as you said, and we say we're on the other side of the line. And I'm a firm believer in speaking those things as if they are. I'm definitely a firm believer in that. But nonetheless, sometimes we are actually truly only resting on the self-employed side and never make it over. So your process, what does that look like in somebody who is structuring or structured so that they have a truly defined business. What does that look like for you as far as the analysis or the initial phases and stages of what it is that you guys do?
Yeah. So the simple test is, if you have a business, again, can become very successful financially as well as personally rewarding. But the old axiom is, if you got hit by a bus and couldn't work, would that business survive?
Mm.
And when we have business owners call us, one of the questions we ask them is, crazy enough, do you take a vacation? Because many business owners say, well, I could never take a vacation because if I did, my business would crash. That's not a good sign for a business. It's not the end of the world, mind you, but in most cases, if business owners can go away for a week or 2 weeks or even 3 weeks and their business continues on and operates normally, that's a very attractive sign to be able to sell the company, because buyers will look at that and know that the business is not totally dependent on that business owner.
That's one of the things that's interesting you say that. I've got recently in recent years to where I do and can vacation. It used to be that it would literally give me heart palpitations, so to speak, when I was going somewhere like, wait a minute. But now it's like, all right, look, y'all got it. I empower the people around me and trust them. So I empower them to be able to work through and handle those things that need to be worked through and handled. So the reasoning behind this transition oftentimes again is you don't have anyone succession wise to move you forward. So let's talk about the emotional challenges. Like, what are those sticking points that you have to help people navigate emotionally? Because if you can't get your mind and your heart in alignment to explore this, then truth told, you'll never do it. Does that sound like a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's very true. And you mentioned children, and that's part of the emotional dynamic, because the fact is that a vast number of American companies are owned by baby boomer generation business owners. I think the statistic is that 10,000 baby boomers turn age 65 every single day. And their companies are by and large their primary source of future wealth, or hopefully generational wealth. And in bygone days, one or more of their children transitioned into the company and took over the business. Today, we hear very few people who own a company who have children that want to move into the business. So what else are they going to do? They have to sell the company because they eventually want to retire, some sooner, some later. So the fact that their children don't want to come into the business, or other family members for that matter, there's an emotional dynamic there as well. And for most business owners, they eat, sleep, and breathe their company. It's their baby. It's their means of social validation. It's an ego driven. It's their social structure, either talking to employees or their vendors or other people in the same field. And they're going to leave that business. And it's a challenging dynamic for many of them, even if they make tons of money. So in my world, when we're helping a business owner sell their company, that's actually part of what we try to help prepare them for. That's not normal for an investment banker. Most people think investment bankers just want to do hard charging negotiations and dollars and percentages and contract terms. And that is certainly true. But I would say on most of the deals I do representing independent business owners, about 50% of the work I do is what I call Dr. Phil work. It's helping those business owners to navigate a very emotional roller coaster ride, because it takes 9 to 10 months to sell a company. That's a national statistic, irregardless of what industry or type of business it is.
So, two things. So, I'm going to start picking up on something you just made mention of. Again, obviously, it's a misnomer, misinformation that when people are, for what you do, that people are coming in with this aggressive tone, with these aggressive tactics, if you will, in order to get people, if you will, out of their business, if that makes any sense. But what I just heard you say is that you guys have a completely different approach as far as how you want to have understanding. You want to work to make sure that you are advising the person, assisting, nurturing, all those things so they can come to the decision that works better and best for them. But my second part, if you will, as a kind of a segue from that, if that makes sense, what are those mistakes that many people oftentimes make that are adverse to them seeking to sell the business? What are those normally?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question because that's the key. It's so sad, Cord, because so many people call us and want to sell. And then when I start going through the question, well, the first question I ask them is, okay, why are you thinking about selling? Because we try to tailor a process, if they're a sellable company, to achieve their personal objectives. And their objectives are oftentimes not mine, but we try to help them achieve their goal. But if they're not sellable, there's, depending on the business and the industry, there can be a whole myriad of things that can be a factor. But the 5 key things we see are, number one, first and foremost, either no accounting or really bad accounting. And no buyer is going to buy a business if the books aren't accurate and complete. And if they do have accurate books, they're normally on a what's called a cash basis as opposed to a GAAP-based basis, where the expenses line up with the revenue so that you can track what the gross profits are in the company. That's an accrual-based accounting method. Almost all buyers borrow money from banks or other lending sources when they buy a business. They put their own equity in. They often ask for the owner to carry back a loan as part of that. Banks only want to work on a GAAP accrual basis. So a lot of our clients have to go back and spend a ton of time and money to restate their financials. So accounting is number one. Number two is what we call owner dependency. So we talked earlier about if you got hit by the proverbial bus, would the business survive? Well, that's what buyers want to know. How dependent is the business on that owner? So if all the clients or customers call that owner, that's not a good sign, because buyers are taking a huge risk and spending a lot of money. And if that owner walks away or transition out over time, then they have risk. So number three, so normally that means they need to have a succession plan in place, which requires time and money well in advance of selling a company. The third thing we see is what's called customer dependency. So if they have one client that represents 20% or more of their business, that's usually a red flag for buyers. In fact, if they have a big enough company that private equity firms or family offices, which are super high, wealthy, net worth people who have so much money, they have a team that buys and makes investments for them. There's a crazy number of them in this country. I got to tell you, Cole, they almost always check out. If you have more than 20% of your business is dependent on one customer. The fourth thing is if you have extreme dependency on one vendor, provide raw goods for your business. I had a client in, believe it or not, Canada, who had an amazing business. This guy was printing money. It was so profitable. But he relied on one very specialized material that was made by one other company in Canada. And if he lost that agreement with that other company, which was a family-owned business, let's say hypothetically that other company went bankrupt. Wouldn't be likely, but if they did, buyer is in deep trouble. So buyers of businesses look at what your vendor structure is. The fifth thing is, and this varies by industry, is what your gross profit margins are. So if you're a distributor, for example, normally those are about 25, 30% gross profit and 10% net income or EBITDA. But different businesses like a SaaS platform software company, super high gross profits. So Buyers look at what your gross profits are and measure it against the industry norms for that particular industry. And if you're below that, it's at least a yellow flag and oftentimes a red flag for buyers. So I could probably name forward 30 other factors that could come into play in different scenarios. But those are the 5 keys when we're marketing a business and they call and buyers say, hey, I'm interested in this company. Those are the 5 questions they ask first.
That's huge and very useful. I get that. So for our listeners, guys, you got to be thinking about this from the big picture. You got to think about it from the perspective of if you got a contract to whatever it is, let's say you got a lawn care business or what have you, and you got a single large contract that represents 50% of your income, that I know Cameron is like, because if you lose that contract, somebody buys the business, they lose that contract, then what? Because we know that in these changes of ownership with businesses, there's going to be some customers or clients that may shed, if you will, in that process. Does that sound about right, Cameron?
Wow, you're spot on, Corwin. So a classic example, when I first joined RateCatcher almost 5 years ago, my first client was an amazingly talented gentleman who was a creative marketing guy. And he did premiums and incentives. Like if you want T-shirts with your logo on them, or pens, or coffee cups, etc., he did that. And one of his clients was a large client with multiple locations, and all of those locations combined represented about 55% of his business. And because he was an extremely creative guy, I can't even count the number of awards he'd won for creativity. Well, we brought 6 buyers to the table for that deal. But in his case, because of those 2 factors, and his profits were well above the industry norm for that kind of a business. So that was a good thing. But no one would pay him any cash up front on closing the deal, because of the risk of what would happen when he ultimately left and what would happen if they lost that huge client that I think they had 25 or 30 locations. And his argument was, well, I called every one of those locations. Well, because we couldn't get any cash and it was all, they were going to give him a job for 2 years and he could hit some targets over 3 years and he would get close to what he hoped to get for the business. Well, he said, hey, the heck with this. I'm just not going to sell. And 6 months after we canceled the whole process, which again went for 9 months, he lost that large client because they brought in a new senior level executive at the corporate level, and he negotiated a new contract with somebody else. And that guy's business was no longer sellable at all.
Yeah, that sounds. Yeah, and those are the things that we have to think about. But you touched on something. This process, sometimes people think that when I sell, it's final, right? So there's a couple times throughout our conversation, Cameron, you've touched on different situations. So, you can sell part of the business and retain some interest and ownership. But if you don't mind, throw out a couple of different scenarios that you've worked on where it wasn't a full transfer of ownership and essentially a full cash out, but maybe essentially some equity brought in, and there's still some involvement of the current owner, if that makes any sense. So give us some scenarios where that's happened.
Thanks, Corey. That's another huge factor in selling a company, because everybody just thinks, oh, I'm going to sell my business. It's going to be worth X and I'm going to get a check or a wire transfer into my bank account and I'm going to walk away. It rarely happens. There are certain cases where it can, but especially in this day and age, if a business has any real meaningful value, let's say it's going to sell for $1 million or more, just as a hypothetical, could be less, could be more. The buyers for that business, if it's under, let's say, $5 to $7 million business, they're going to take out an SBA loan. And the Small Business Administration is going to require them to put, generally, I think it's about 10% of their money into the business. And the SBA is going to loan a big chunk of the money, but then they're going to ask the owner of the business to carry back what's called a seller note, which is basically loaning the buyer part of the purchase price. And those loan terms can be good if the seller has a good representative, broker, investment banker representing them. They can negotiate a pretty good deal where they can get better money. Well, of course, the stock market is going crazy good right now, but it's not always the case. Those loans are generally 3 to 5 years. The interest rates are negotiated, generally at or slightly above what the market rates are. But sometimes there are no payments against that loan for a year or 2 years. And maybe it's just interest for a certain period of time. And then there's what's called a balloon payment at the end, where they get the full remaining payoff at the end of the period, which is generally 3 to 5 years. Some will occasionally stretch to 7 years. Also, part of the purchase price can be paid on an earnout. So the example I gave you a minute ago, where the marketing guy couldn't get his company sold for cash, any cash up front, all 6 of the buyers in that deal were going to pay him out over a 2 or a 3 year period based on hitting certain financial milestones in the company, because that reduced their risk.
That is huge. That's huge. So that's proof that there's quote unquote more than one way to skin a cat. So Cameron, let's get your contact information out. How can people reach you, get in contact with you?
Corwin, I'm happy to help any of your listeners at any time. No cost, no obligation, no sales pitch. Again, I'm Cameron Bishop. My email address is cameron.bishop@raincatcher.com. Our corporate website is www.raincatcher.com, or look me up on LinkedIn. You can find me there as well and send me a chat message. Happy to schedule a time to chat with you, just to answer questions if it'll help you.
Awesome. Awesome, Cameron. I greatly appreciate that. So I want to thank you again for being on the show with us today. I really appreciate it, quote unquote, from the bottom of my heart, man. I really thank you for taking the time. For our listeners, you guys, look, let me give you these to-dos, the things that you should be taking action on. So if you're a business owner, don't wait until you're ready to sell, if that makes any sense. Start planning now. What is your, pardon the pun, what is your exit strategy? How is this going to look? How do you want it to look, right? So let's start having these conversations early. My takeaway, Cameron, from what you've said today is that a well-planned exit, and y'all got to excuse that pun, isn't just a transaction. It's the opportunity to turn your hard work into a lasting legacy. And guys, y'all know how we are here about, if you will, our legacy. So Cameron, again, thank you for being with us today. I really, again, appreciate it.
Amen. Hope it was helpful for your listeners.
Awesome. So guys, our listeners, hey, y'all know how I feel. You know what I say. You can always put the two of those things together, and I give it to you this way, which is to tell you that I love you. I love you. And we're going to see you guys out there in those streets.